Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of my Lancastrians and Yorkists vlog. Remember that we're in what we call Depth Topic 3 in the Edexcel A-level unit on Lancastrians and Yorkists, and this is looking at the crisis surrounding Henry VI. And really, most questions here will be about why Henry VI ends up losing his throne to Edward IV eventually. What the causes of that are, and perhaps what the significance of some of the events are along the way. So we've thought about the causes being Henry VI himself, and of course the ongoing kind of issues surrounding him in terms of finances and foreign catastrophes in the Hundred Years' War, and then also the uprisings, the popular uprisings that led to the downfall of the Duke of Suffolk and Cade's Rebellion. Last time we also introduced Richard of York, who becomes one of the main protagonists. And this time I want to start by just mentioning and dwelling on slightly Margaret of Anjou. So Margaret of Anjou was Queen of England. She was Henry VI's wife, and she'd become his wife, remember, as a result of the Treaty of Tours, which was opposed by a good number of nobility within England, seen as being a bad deal. It probably was a bad deal, but the overall aim of Somerset and Suffolk in the Treaty of Tours was to try and appease France and establish some sort of truce with them to calm things down in the war. However, partly because of this, Margaret of Anjou has always been portrayed in a very hostile way by English commentators. But bear in mind that her position right from the start meant that she was likely to be seen in this way. She was 15 years old when she was married to Henry VI in 1445, and at that point entered a court where straight away people were opposed to her being there. For example, Humphrey of Gloucester, although he is out of the picture by 1447, was implacably opposed to it. For this reason, again from the start, Margaret's natural allies were both Somerset and Sussex, and she shows a great deal of loyalty to them because they had kind of negotiated her marriage, and presumably they were quite pro her coming over to England. So there's that problem, and her loyalty to them and her trust in them as people, I think, and their motives and strategies does mean that she gets more negative press than she might have done otherwise. Also, as a foreign queen, Margaret of Anjou had to fulfil the role of diplomat, representative of France, and this was done at a time where the Hundred Years' War was ending with French victory, almost as a direct result of the Treaty of Tours and her allies' strategies, Suffolk and Somerset's strategies. So in that situation, she's on a hiding to nothing as well, right from the beginning. However, it is fair to say that she plays an active role in opposing York and later Warwick as well, and she does encourage Henry VI to disinherit the heirs of York, Warwick and Salisbury in the 1459 Parliament of Devils, which significantly increases tension in the country and probably leads to the final acts of the Wars of the Roses in this situation. After Wakefield in particular, the Lancastrian army also pillages and loots significantly on their way south, and this lost her support in London, which was already kind of not really a fan of her, and that again probably turns the tide away from the Lancastrians at that point. So she does make some significant strategic errors later in the 1450s. So back to the narrative, and we got up to 1452, where Richard of York had been embarrassed and forced to apologise to Henry VI and accept Somerset's role as leader of the government. Good news in 1452 for Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou. Margaret of Anjou became pregnant, and after 7 years, this was not none too soon. Margaret, of course, had been given some of the blame for that, and in fact, there was a rumour that the baby might have been Somerset's rather than Henry VI. He was made godfather of little baby Edward when he was born. But nevertheless, this is good news because it meant there was an heir for Henry VI and it strengthened Margaret's position at court. That good news, though, was tempered by two things. First of all, the hearing the news in 1453 from France that the final collapse of English forces in the Battle of Castillon meant that the Hundred Years' War was over and the French had won. And probably triggered by this, we're not quite sure, and the collapse in Henry VI's mental health. For about 17 months, he was unable to speak. He seems to have been unable to understand what was said, or certainly unable to reason. We're not quite sure what happened to him, what the diagnosis of that would be, because obviously our records are incomplete and they had limited understanding of medicine at the time. But the thinking is perhaps it was catatonic schizophrenia. He even failed to respond to the safe and healthy arrival of his son in October 1453. Now, this is a massive crisis in medieval times because the king is the government. He's the centre of it, and he drives everything through, in theory at least. He's certainly the figurehead of it, even if he's not up to much. So what to do while he was out? Well, while Henry VI was incapacitated, Margaret and Somerset tried to keep power in their hands. Margaret wanted to be regent herself and to step in on behalf of her son to run the country, and there was some sort of precedent for that in the past, but she was a woman and that counted against her to start with, and also she was French and not very well liked, and those things counted against her more significantly. So her choice was Somerset, and for the first few months that seemed to work okay, but in November 1453 Somerset called together a great council, and the purpose of this was to confirm little baby Edward as the heir to the throne. He deliberately, tactically did not invite Richard of York, but Richard of York turned up anyway with a load of mates, and an argument ensues about who really should be in charge of England. In this argument, Richard and his allies win. They say Somerset's a traitor, i.e. that he's let down the country, not that he's plotting to remove the king, but that he has misadvised the king and misled the king so badly in his strategies that he's effectively acting against the country. So Somerset's arrested and put in the Tower, and Richard of York and his allies are then able to seize control of the Great Council, and they take over the running of England for this time when Henry VI is incapacitated. 4 months on, on the 27th of March 1454, they go further and make Richard of York the defender and protector of the realm. And this is the official title that had been given to Humphrey of Gloucester at one point when Henry VI was just a baby. This is kind of putting all that protectorship in one person. So Richard of York becomes the most, like the Prime Minister, like the President, really, the country underneath Henry VI. York does pretty well in his time as protector. It should be said he brings some stability to the country. He cuts royal expenditure, which is important to do because the financial situation was poor, and he manages to resolve some of the kind of ongoing conflicts around the country and bring about peace in the regions. What he doesn't do is bring Somerset to trial. Somerset's just left alone in the Tower. And this is a sign where we see that even though he's managed to act as protector, he is unable to take that final step and cement his position. However, he does pick up the support of Warwick and his dad, the Bishop of Salisbury, because they are now in a land dispute with Somerset in Glamorgan, or Warwick's in a land dispute with Somerset in Glamorgan. And they're also having disputes with Percy, the Earl of Northumberland. Henry Percy, it's the Percy family. Richard of York made Warwick's dad Salisbury Chancellor of England, and that upset the Percys, and they, Exeter, and their friends rebelled in May 1454, but they're forced to flee, and Exeter is imprisoned. So things went pretty well for Richard of York during his protectorship, but he has kind of upset a few people, the Percys and Exeter in particular, and I guess Somerset's not feeling too great about life either there in the Tower. So when Henry VI recovered at the end of 1454, and in February 1455, York officially stepped down as protector, although initially Henry VI recognised that Richard of York had done a great job and was very grateful to him, he then went on to undo everything York had done, including releasing Somerset and Exeter from the Tower, almost certainly influenced, of course, by Margaret of Anjou, whose favourite lord is still Somerset. This led inevitably to a resumption of rivalries, and the dilemma for York really is whether he sits back and just kind of takes things on the chin and perhaps retires in quietness to the country, or whether he should intervene first and get his revenge in on Somerset, or just wait for them to attack him and counter-strike at that point. York decides that his best chance of success is to act first. And so in May 1455, actually when the king is on progress towards the north, and got very far, the first Battle of St Albans takes place. This is York and the Nevilles, that's Warwick and Salisbury to me and you, against Henry VI, Somerset and the Percys. York and his allies had about 3,000 men, Somerset only had about 2,000 men, and Warwick is key to this victory. This is the first kind of role, really, that the Earl of Warwick plays in this whole situation. York won the Battle of St Albans. Very, very, very unusually, Somerset, Henry Percy, the Earl of Northumberland, and Thomas Clifford are all killed. This was really unusual in medieval warfare, where the nobility normally were captured, and it was the regular soldiers that were killed. This time round, York and Warwick were very clear that the nobility were the ones that should be killed or even executed, and the regular soldiers should survive. Henry VI was captured. In fact, in the battle, very seriously, got nicked in the neck by an arrow. The Yorkists emphasised that this had been their goal all along. They were just trying to free the king from his evil counsellors and then take vows of loyalty to him. They're not trying to overthrow him, but they are trying to capture him and dominate them. York became protector again in November 1455, despite this time Henry VI probably not being incapacitated. And Warwick, Richard Neville, became captain of Calais, which is an important position because it's where the only kind of standing army under English control was kept. Parliament sort of support the Yorkists in all this, although the parliaments aren't very well attended. So this seems like in the mid-1450s that Richard of York has seized control of England, of the king, and has triumphed in this kind of first phase of the Wars of the Roses. But the things to remember are that also Margaret of Anjou has got away, and that at that Battle of St Albans, a bunch of sons had inherited titles because of the murder of their fathers. Henry Beaufort has taken over his father's title in Somerset. John Clifford has taken over his father's position, Thomas Clifford's position. So I think we'll stop there, and next time we'll go on to look at Richard of York's time kind of running England with Henry VI in his back pocket and consider why it doesn't last. But for now, that's how Richard of York seizes power in the mid-1450s. Hope that's helpful, and see you soon.